Today's video is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Stick around till the end of the video to hear about the best way to play daily fantasy sports. Right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder are in the midst of their first rebuild since coming to OKC back in 2008. Prior to 2020, they've only had one losing season as a brand new franchise, so it's a bit of uncharted waters for the new organization. However, we're being led by one of the best GMs in the league, Sam Presti. Now, Sam Presti's made some mistakes in the past, but overall he's regarded as one of the best in the business in league circles. Right now, he's attempting a rebuild in a fashion like we've never seen before. This is going to change how teams rebuild for decades to come. However, there are some voices out there that have chastised Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City Thunder for the way that we've gone about our rebuild. And most importantly, people have been spreading a lot of false information about how the Thunder are rebuilding, how they're tanking, what their methods are, and what the ultimate goal is. As perhaps the biggest Thunder fan in the world, I thought it was my duty to go ahead and make this video and explain to you the truth about the Thunder's rebuild. What are we doing? What's the game plan? And what are all the lies the media have been telling you? Let's go ahead and get right into it. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Back in 2019, after Dame hit his shot, the Thunder traded away Russell Westbrook to the Rockets and Paul George to the Clippers for a haul that included Chris Paul, Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 7 first-round picks, and 4 pick swaps. It was an unprecedented draft haul in a single offseason. And while it seemed to signal the start of a rebuild for OKC, Chris Paul, Gilgeous-Alexander, Dennis Schroeder, Danilo Gallinari, Steven Adams, and others pushed this team forward through to a playoff spot in 2020 against the Houston Rockets, where we lost in 7 games in the bubble. But it was a really successful season and honestly one of my favorite as a Thunder fan. If you want to see me make a whole video about that season, because I will, go ahead and comment down below. I'd love to make that. But following the season, OKC made a full commitment to the rebuild, dealing Chris Paul to the Suns, dealing Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers, in return for Danny Green, who he then flipped to the Sixers for Al Horford, and dealing Steven Adams to the Pelicans. It was a complete teardown of the playoff team and really kind of felt like this was the start of the true rebuild. Over the last 2 seasons since then, the Thunder have gone 46-108 and ended up with the 6th overall pick last year selecting Josh Giddey and the 2nd overall pick this past year selecting Chet Holmgren. Even beyond these 2 top 10 selections, the Thunder have accumulated a wealth of young talent through the draft and great trades. Names like Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort, Trey Mann, Jalen Williams, Ousmane Dieng, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Alexei Pokusevski, Darius Bazley, and Aaron Wiggins. It's one of the best young cores in the league. In my truly honest and biased opinion, I think the Thunder could have been in play-in conversations this year if not for Chet Holmgren's season-ending injury, which sets the Thunder up for probably another top 5-6 draft selection this year, potentially bringing in Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson, 2 incredible talents in a stacked draft class. So that's your recap up to this point. Now, obviously, the Thunder have tanked over these past 2 seasons. It's not a secret. I'm not trying to say that we haven't done that. I'm not trying to hide that from you. We have been tanking, and I fully understand that. However, there's been a lot of misinformation and invalid criticisms of the way the Thunder have been tanking. Before we get into that though, let's talk about tanking a bit more in general. For those of you that may be unaware, although I'm sure all of you know, tanking is the act of purposely trying to lose games more than you typically would. You can trade away veterans for draft picks, sit veterans, play young guys more than you usually would, things like that. It is an absolute necessity in today's NBA to tank for small market teams. Franchises like the Lakers can bring in like a LeBron James in free agency or have an Anthony Davis dying to go there, and they can end up rebuilding in just a couple years. However, for small market teams like Oklahoma City, LeBron's not going to be running to play for the Thunder. It's just not going to happen. That's not realistic. So the only way to truly rebuild is through the draft, and the best way to get the top draft picks, players that can truly alter the trajectory of a franchise, you have to tank. You have to do whatever you can to try and secure the best odds possible. If you don't, you end up as a middle of the pack team that gets the 8th or 9th pick over and over again, and while there can be some studs found there, the true way to really guarantee that you get the player you want is by tanking and getting that 1st overall pick. As I said earlier, the Thunder are tanking. I 100% know that, and I completely support it. It's the only way we're going to get back to true relevance in the way the NBA is set up at the moment. Other franchises are doing it too. The Houston Rockets, the Detroit Pistons have both been doing it for a few years. The Spurs and the Pacers are recently entering the fold to try and go for Victor Wembanyama in this year's draft. And you have a team like the Trailblazers, who last year, after Damian Lillard got hurt, completely tanked the second half of the season, playing young guys and at the end of the year sitting guys to try and get the best odds possible to get a top pick to bring in next year to help Damian Lillard. But for some reason, out of all of these franchises, the Thunder in particular have received a ton of hate and criticism from people, claiming that they're the new face of tanking, that they're ruining the league, etc., and I truly don't understand that. One of the most prominent complaints people have about the Thunder is that, quote, they've been tanking forever, which is just not true. Just over 2 years ago, in September of 2020, the Thunder were in a Game 7 against the Houston Rockets in the NBA bubble. That's literally 25 months ago at this point. At that same moment, the Detroit Pistons were the 13th seed in the Eastern Conference and are still rebuilding now, heading into their 4th year. The following season, the Thunder started tanking at the same time as the Houston Rockets and the Orlando Magic, yet neither of these franchises received the same criticisms. It just doesn't add up. And I'm not saying these teams deserve criticism because they don't. The Thunder don't either. 3 to 4 years is a perfectly normal length for a rebuild. It takes time when you're a small market. The other argument is that OKC is blatantly tanking, which I will admit we do at times. The last 2 seasons, towards the end of the year for the last 5 or 6 games, we've played a lot of 10-day guys to try out some young talent. We're going to lose a lot more games that way. I understand that's a tanking maneuver, but once again, sitting your players is something that these other tanking teams do, not just the Thunder. For example, the Pistons and Magic last year had games against the Thunder where they played their starters in the first half and completely sat them in the second half. It's a tanking maneuver. Everybody does it. I'm not saying you shouldn't because you should. It's just weird how the Thunder are the only team that get criticism for it. If you don't like it, talk about every other team doing it too. A big gripe I have is that people make up things about the way OKC tanks that just aren't true. By far the biggest one is saying that the Thunder keep sitting Gilgeous-Alexander in order to lose games, and this is just not true. Around the All-Star break in 2021, Shai suffered from plantar fasciitis, which is a really painful foot injury that, if not treated, can really hinder a player's career down the line. So Shai sat out for the rest of the year, which for some reason people think was for tanking purposes, when not only did he sit out for us, but he didn't play for Team Canada in the Olympic qualifiers that summer, something that he said multiple times he was really excited to do. I don't think he would have sat out for his country if it was just a tanking maneuver. This past season, Shai suffered a couple ankle injuries that kept him out for some time here and there, and towards the end of the year he re-injured one. He did come back and play for a few games, but we did shut him down for roughly the last 10 games of the season, which I will admit he probably could have come back, but once again, just being safe with your franchise player. If you want to count it though, then sure, you can count those 10 games in one season where we were out of the playoffs as sitting him to tank. Beyond that, he's played freely. I just don't understand how a player dealing with multiple real injuries has turned into some fake conspiracy theory about how Sam Presti and the Thunder are doing whatever they can to tank. They're not letting Shai play because they want to lose games. Sure, we do to get a good draft pick, but we're not sitting Shai egregiously to do that. It's just a false narrative that continues to gain traction regardless of how many times I angrily tweet about it. On a smaller scale, we can talk about how the Thunder sat Al Horford for the second half of his one season with the team, which yes, we did that to try and lose some games, but also to let him rest. It was something that was agreed upon between him and the organization at the start of the season that he would sit the second half of the year, and now he's been playing great for Boston because he got some extra time to rest. Yes, it's a tanking maneuver, but it benefited both parties. However, in a kind of a similar vein, you see nobody talk about how the Rockets last year sat John Wall for the whole season, despite the fact that he wanted to play and there was no agreement. He told the Rockets multiple times, I want to come play basketball, but they let him keep sitting. They forced him to not come to the games. It's a tanking maneuver. I understood why they did it. However, I just find it weird that nobody talks about that when everyone talks about the Al Horford thing. But enough about that, let's talk about what makes the Thunder's rebuild so special and unique from the hundreds of other rebuilds that's happened in the past. At its core, a rebuild is very simple. You lose a lot of games, you get a draft pick, and you just keep repeating that until you eventually get good again. If you're a big name team, you probably bring in a star free agent at some point, or even if you're a smaller market team, maybe you trade for a star to bring alongside that young core at some point. There are a lot of mutations to the way things can go, but that's basically the core of things. However, the length of this cycle can vary a ton due to the NBA draft lottery. You can be a team that gets 2 back-to-back first overall picks and boom, you're good again. You don't have to tank anymore. Or you're a team that gets like the 6th pick, the 8th pick, the 3rd pick, the 8th pick again. You just keep kind of getting middle of the ground picks. Maybe you get a top 3 pick every once in a while, but if you don't get consistently top level picks, it's hard to get back to contention. And so a lot of teams kind of suffer and hang out in that mediocrity for a while. However, there is one way where you can try and best guarantee your odds at getting one of those top picks and escaping this cycle, and that's by accumulating as many draft picks as possible. Going back to that 2019 offseason where the Thunder tried to tear everything down, you can immediately see Sam Presti's vision. The Paul George trade, Sam Presti leveraged the interest of the Raptors in PG alongside the Clippers zone, who really needed to get Paul George to secure Kawhi Leonard, allowing him to get a ton of draft capital. Then there was the Russ trade, where we took back Chris Paul's contract alongside 2 first-round picks picks and 2 pick swaps, because at that point, CP3 was seen as kind of a negative asset due to his growing injury concerns and massive deal. In the 2020 offseason, the Thunder dealt Chris Paul to the Suns for a collection of players as well as another first-round pick. We dealt Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers, bringing back Danny Green, who was then flipped to the Sixers for Al Horford's once again seen as untradeable contract, bringing in another first-round pick alongside him. In 2021, Al Horford was flipped to Boston for Kemba Walker, a second-round pick, and another first-round pick. By the end of the 2021 offseason, the Thunder had accumulated 17 first-round picks and 21 second-round draft picks over the course of the next 7 drafts. This was completely unheard of. The Thunder had committed to tearing down the roster in a way that would maximize draft potential. A great example of this is in the 2021 draft lottery. In that lottery, the Thunder had the 4th best odds at getting the top pick, while the Rockets had the best odds. However, if that Rockets pick fell to number 5, which it had a 48% chance to do, it would then become the Thunder's pick, giving us a chance of having 2 top 5 picks in the first year of our rebuild. Now, it didn't happen, as the Rockets landed at number 2 and got Jalen Green, but it was basically a coin flip to happen. It's a great example of how, by bringing in these high-level picks, Presti has maximized our potential odds. In 2024, the Thunder will have a similar chance, once again owning the Rockets pick, which is top 4 protected for them, in a year where they'll once again probably be outside the playoff picture. The Thunder also have the Clippers pick in 2026, where at that point, the Thunder could potentially be competing, while the Clippers, having 2 stars that by that point will each be on the wrong side of 35, they could be on the decline, potentially giving the Thunder, even when competing, a high-level draft asset. No rebuild has ever been structured like this. GMs in the past have accumulated draft picks at a high rate, but Sam Presti is doing it far beyond what any GM thought possible for a long time. He's done a great job of maximizing potential to receive top-end talent in the draft both now and in the future, even when we're competing. But once again, as usual, there are criticisms of Sam Presti's methods. Specifically, people are saying things like, why does he keep bringing in all these picks? He can't draft that many players, which they're not wrong. You can't draft 30 plus players, but as we've talked about multiple times in this video, you can do way more than just draft guys using picks. Ever since the Paul George deal in 2019, draft picks have become increasingly involved in big name trades. The Jazz got 7 first-round picks this past year when they traded both Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. The San Antonio Spurs got 3 first-round picks for DeJounte Murray. A couple years ago, the Pelicans got 2 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps for Drew Holiday. This is the new landscape of the NBA trading world. You have to have draft picks and you have to include them in bulk to secure stars. A year from now, imagine that the Thunder are competing, led by Shea, Dort, Giddey, Chet, and whoever they got in the 2023 draft class. Suddenly, a superstar becomes disgruntled in his current position. The Thunder pick up the phone and call and say, hey, we'll give you some of our young guys as part of our core, as well as 6, 7, 8, 30 first-round picks. They're gonna say yes. By trading for not just draft picks, but potentially high-level draft picks, the Thunder have put themselves in the perfect position to land a star or superstar caliber player to add to this young core when the time is right. Think like when Paul George came to Oklahoma City. Nobody saw that coming, but now we have a billion more assets than we did back then. You can also use draft picks to change your luck. This past year, the Thunder got the 2nd and 13th overall picks, but we really wanted Ousmane Dieng, who was there and available, at the 11th overall pick. So we dealt 3 protected first-round picks in the future to bring in a player that we really coveted. It allows you to maneuver the draft even if you're not as lucky as you want to be. Picks are immensely valuable in the modern league, and Sam Presti knows this better than anybody. So, with all this in mind, what does the timeline look like for the Thunder's rebuild? Now, I'm a Thunder fan, I can kind of give you my idea, but obviously it's not going to be perfect. In my eyes, I think 2023-2024, so next season, is probably when we start to try and compete again. This year, it's a stacked draft class. It doesn't make sense to compete too much. Plus, Chet Holmgren being out for the year kind of hurts us anyways in that regard. Plus, the new CBA will be in effect starting this upcoming offseason. And the Thunder have been screwed by some collective bargaining agreement stuff in the past. So I think it makes sense to wait until all those financial restrictions and other stuff is kind of out of the way before we go into our rebuild and potentially get screwed over. So in my mind, I think as Dort enters year 5, Shea enters his prime, Giddey enters year 3, we'll have Chet back next year, plus whoever we get towards the top of the 2023 draft. I think that group will start to kind of move on the rise. It's not going to be a championship year or anything like that, but I think next year is really when this team is going to start to show how good they are and how special this core is. If Sam Presti's plan works and we win a title through this process, it could truly revolutionize the way GMs rebuild their teams. That's part of the reason why the process is so interesting to me. If you don't know, the process is the Sixers rebuild that happened a few years ago, led by Sam Hinkie, who kind of changed the game himself. From 2013 to 2016, the Sixers tried to lose all out completely and won just over 40 games in that span. but it worked, as they got Joel Embiid in that draft. They got Ben Simmons too, who they traded for James Harden, who's now on the team, and ultimately it led to a contender being built in Philly and how good they are now. Sam Hinkie was eventually forced out of the league though for these methods. Sam Presti has emulated this, dealing veterans at a rapid rate, but accumulating draft picks at a level that Sam Hinkie could have only dreamt of. Wherever he is, I hope that Hinkie is looking at Sam Presti and he's smiling, because he kind of set this path forward. And now it could be Sam Presti and the Thunder who are setting the path forward for all these other franchises for years to come. Only time will tell if it works out the way Presti intends, but as a very biased fan, I'm a true believer, and I hope after this video, you are too. As I mentioned earlier, this video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, a fantasy sports platform like no other. On Underdog, you can play in a multitude of ways, whether it's a daily lineup building contest, a daily NBA pick'em for up to 20 times money, or even a season-long fantasy league. With the NFL season in full swing and the NBA season right around the corner, we finally almost made it back. There's no better time to check out Underdog than right now. Here are some picks that I've made for NBA opening night. I think it's going to be a great night of games, and I'm expecting a couple guys in particular to go off. I also got a win on Thursday Night Football a couple weeks ago, which was pretty exciting to see. If you want to check it out, make sure you use code CONE when you sign up. I'll put a link in the description too to get to Underdog Fantasy. And if you use code CONE, they'll match your first deposit up to $100. It helps me out a ton and helps you as well. Appreciate Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. And I appreciate you for making it to the end of this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy. It helps out the channel a ton. And also go ahead and comment down below letting me know what you think about the Thunder's rebuild. As the self-proclaimed biggest Thunder fan in the world, I'd love to hear what y'all have to say. I appreciate y'all watching. I will see y'all later. Real one, say it back.